If your dog wouldn't stop barking right outside your baby's room, would you scold him or follow him? For Ellie and Mark, young parents in rural Ohio, it started with a noise that seemed like nothing. Just their rescue dog, Buster, scratching at the nursery door again. But something in his eyes felt different that night, panicked urgent. Ellie had just gotten baby Grace to sleep after a long, colicky evening. The last thing she needed was more chaos. Mark was in the kitchen reheating soup, tired from his second job, when the barking escalated into frantic howls. At first, they yelled at Buster to stop, but he didn't. He kept pawing at the door, whining, and turning his head like he wanted them to follow. Buster wasn't a loud dog by nature. He'd been skittish ever since they adopted him from the shelter 6 months ago. Rescued from a hoarding situation, he still flinched at fast movements and hid during thunderstorms. But around Grace, he had always been gentle, watchful, protective in a way Ellie couldn't explain. That night, something about his barking felt desperate. Mark finally opened the nursery door, just to calm him down. Grace was asleep, safe in her crib. Nothing seemed wrong, but Buster pushed past Mark, sniffed the window, and let out a low, guttural growl. It was a sound they'd never heard from him before. Outside, snow was falling quietly, blanketing the woods behind their home. Ellie peered through the frosted glass but saw only darkness. Still, Buster stood frozen, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the trees. Then they all heard it, a muffled sound from the woods. Faint, but unmistakable. Crying. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't the wind. It was human. A child, or something close. Ellie's blood ran cold. Mark grabbed a flashlight without thinking. Buster was already scratching at the back door, whining louder. The couple exchanged a glance, half fear, half disbelief. They stepped out into the cold, leaving baby Grace bundled and asleep. The beam of Mark's flashlight cut through the snow, illuminating nothing at first. Then Buster took off toward the edge of the woods, his paws silent in the powder. He looked back once, as if pleading with them to follow. Ellie's boots crunched behind him. Every few feet, Buster stopped and sniffed the ground. The crying grew clearer, now soft, rhythmic, heart-wrenching. It was coming from a thicket near the creek. Mark held Ellie's hand tighter. "What if it's a trap?" she whispered. Then, through the branches, they saw it. A bundle, small, motionless, wrapped in what looked like a wet hoodie. The sound was coming from inside. Ellie rushed forward, heart in her throat. Mark pulled back a branch and what they saw made them both stop cold. Not just a child. Something more. The bundle stirred. A tiny hand reached out. The crying grew louder. Ellie fell to her knees. Buster sat beside her, silent now, eyes locked on the child. And in that frozen, impossible moment, Mark did the only thing he could think of. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the cold night as Mark gave their location. "There's a baby," he said, breathless. "Left in the woods. Alive, but freezing." Ellie wrapped her coat around the child without hesitation, tears already streaming down her face. The baby's skin was ice cold and her lips a frightening shade of blue. Buster sat close, nose against the tiny figure, refusing to move. Ellie couldn't stop shaking, not from the cold, but from the weight of it all. Who would leave a baby like this? Why here? So far from the road, so close to death. The child's faint wails barely pierced the wind anymore. Mark paced in a circle, trying to stay calm, trying to keep signal. "They're on their way," he told Ellie. 10 minutes. Some minutes, but 10 minutes felt like forever. Ellie cradled the child tighter, whispering the same words again and again. "You're safe now. You're safe." Buster never blinked. The baby wasn't alone. A torn diaper bag lay half buried in snow, with a cracked bottle and an empty formula can inside. Mark found it just as the flashlight beam landed on something else, tiny footprints, maybe a woman's, leading back toward the road. Whoever left her had walked away. Ellie's mind raced. It must have been someone young, maybe scared. Maybe she thought she was doing the right thing. Mark didn't answer. He was staring at the footprints, jaw clenched. Buster followed his gaze, growling low again. Something wasn't right. The woods felt... watched, then headlights. 2 sheriff's cars pulled up, tires crunching snow. Officers rushed out, wrapping the baby in blankets and asking questions. Ellie and Mark answered everything they could. Buster stood between them and the officers, alert but calm, as if he knew this was bigger than them. A paramedic confirmed what Ellie feared. The baby's temperature was dangerously low. If it had been just an hour more, he muttered, shaking his head. She wouldn't have made it. Mark's knees gave out a little. Ellie squeezed his hand. Buster leaned into her side, grounding her. That's when the questions turned serious. You didn't touch anything else? Asked one officer. There might be evidence nearby, Mark nodded, but Ellie spoke up. The dog found her, not us. He wouldn't stop barking at the window. He led us here. The deputy knelt to Buster's level, brushing his ears gently. Then he's not just a pet, the man said. He's a witness. Ellie looked down at Buster, suddenly realizing just how close they'd come to missing everything. What if they had ignored him? What if they had waited? Back at home hours later, Grace was still asleep. Oblivious. Safe. But everything had changed. Mark stood at the window now, staring into the woods. Ellie wrapped her arms around Buster, who rested his head on her knee. They had gone out to save a child, but something deeper had been awakened. The next morning, Ellie barely slept. She kept replaying Buster's cries, the cold, the baby's tiny fingers. Grace cooed in her crib, unaware that her parents had spent the night with another child fighting for her life. Mark sat at the kitchen table, reading updates on his phone. The baby had survived. Barely. The hospital released a statement. She was about 5 months old, dehydrated, suffering from hypothermia, but stable. No one had come forward to claim her. No missing child reports. It was as if she had been erased, abandoned with the hope she'd never be found. Ellie couldn't stop crying. A detective visited the house later that day. We're trying to trace the diaper brand, the hoodie, anything, she said. But the truth is, if your dog hadn't alerted you, we'd be dealing with a body, not a baby. Buster sat near the fireplace, quietly watching her. She gave him a soft nod before leaving. Word spread quickly. Local news stations picked up the story. Rescue dog saves abandoned baby in the woods. The phone rang nonstop. People from the shelter where they'd adopted Buster called, overjoyed. They had saved him once, and now he had saved someone else. But not everyone reacted with celebration. Online, comments poured in with questions, doubts, and anger. Who would do this to a child? Find the mother. There's no excuse, Ellie read them all and felt torn. Part of her was furious, but part of her thought about desperation, about being alone and afraid. Days passed and the woods felt different now. Sacred, somehow. Ellie started walking there with Buster every afternoon, letting him lead, letting the silence speak. One afternoon, he paused again, this time at the edge of the creek. Not barking, just watching, as if remembering. Mark returned from work early one evening, holding an envelope. They're opening an investigation into the mother, he said. They think she might have been living out of her car, maybe a runaway. Ellie sank into the couch. Grace on her lap, Buster at her feet. She didn't want her to die, she whispered. At the hospital, the baby was improving. Nurses nicknamed her Snowdrop because of how delicate she looked when she arrived. Ellie asked if they could visit. At first, they said no. But then a social worker called back. She recognizes your voices. She calms down when we play the 911 recording. So Ellie and Mark went. They stood beside her hospital crib, hands trembling. Snowdrop blinked up at them, calm and curious. Ellie leaned closer, whispering softly. Buster hadn't come, he wasn't allowed, but his presence felt sewn into the moment, like a third heartbeat in the room. Before they left, the nurse pressed something into Ellie's hand. It was a small tag from the baby's ankle. You were part of her beginning, she said gently. Wherever her story goes next, she won't start it alone. Ellie walked out into the parking lot, the snow melting beneath her boots, and smiled. Life didn't go back to normal because normal had shifted. Ellie started volunteering twice a week at the local women's shelter, offering help to young mothers in crisis. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had left Snowdrop in the woods. Not to hurt her, but maybe because she saw no other way. At home, Buster was different too. Still gentle, still quiet, but now he followed Grace everywhere, almost like a second shadow. He slept beneath her crib, waited by the door during naps, and whimpered if she cried too long. Something had changed in him, like he'd been given a purpose. Mark installed cameras around the house and took a leave of absence from his second job. I want to be home more, he told Ellie. We've already almost missed one miracle. He started taking daily walks with Grace and Buster. the three of them bundled tight against the winter wind. People in the town started waving more often, stopping to talk. Strangers dropped off bags of baby clothes and diapers at their doorstep. One elderly woman left a note that read, "Thank your dog for me. My granddaughter was born the same day. I held her tighter because of yours." A GoFundMe was created for Snowdrop's future. Ellie and Mark didn't start it, but they contributed. Every dollar felt like a small piece of hope placed gently into her hands. The community didn't just want to save her, they wanted to protect every child who might be hidden in the cold. A month later, Ellie testified at the custody hearing. The judge asked why she cared so much. Ellie answered simply, "Because if Buster hadn't cried out, she wouldn't be here. He gave her a second chance. I want to be part of what she does with it." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Snowdrop was placed in a foster home with the possibility of adoption. Ellie and Mark didn't fight it. They believed love finds the right hands. But they remained part of her circle. Monthly visits, video calls, tiny drawings from Grace taped to her crib. The girls had bonded in a way only they could. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Ellie watched Grace and Buster napping side by side on the rug. She reached down, rubbing his ear. "You knew," she whispered. "Before any of us, you knew." His tail thumped once, slow and sure. Her heart filled with a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. Mark came in, holding a letter. "It's from the foster mom," he said. "She wants to name her Hope. Says she believes it's what saved her." Ellie smiled through tears. It was perfect. Not just a name, but a direction. A reason to keep walking, even when the path disappears into snow. He didn't just save a baby in the woods. He reminded them all what it means to listen, really listen, when someone cries out in the dark. Buster wasn't just a rescue dog. He was the one who rescued them.